Okay, Costa, tell us about what happened when the underground was getting your father out of the country.
Well, the Underground Man uh, was successful in getting people across because after the communists came in, he was building all the mini fortresses on the Austrian border. So he was very intimately aware of how the Austrian border was and where the good crossing points were and where policemen were stationed and what the routes were to patrol it and where they had to sleep and rest and eat their food and all of that. So he was very intimately aware because he built most of those things while the while working for some company that was doing this. So he started ferrying people back and forth, and so he went and he met my father in Belgrade, and then they traveled to Zagreb, where they stayed in my uncle Josip's apartment, who said, "Guys, here it is, here's the key. I'm out of here, I don't know you."
Okay.
So they stayed overnight there and ate their food and got ready and got on the train and took the train to Slovenia and toward Maribor. And my father had a suit which was made of same kind of a clothing that Yugoslav army officers, the uniforms were made out of, except it was cut like a civilian suit. However, on the first notice, if you just looked at him on the street, your first impression is this must be an officer. And then you would scrutinize to see whether he had any insignia, and if you didn't see any insignia, then said, maybe he's a civilian, but you still had this basic feeling like he should have been an officer because the color and the cut was very similar but not identical. So when my father was brought to a place where they approached the border, he inquired of his guide and he said, "You're not going to take me across this bridge, are you?" And to cross the border. And he said, "Never mind, you just follow me and pay attention to what I do. If I start running, you start running. If there's a problem, I'll take care of it." So they go and they approach, and finally the guy steps on the bridge, and my father says, "What shall I do now? Shall I follow him or shall I turn back?"
Your father didn't have any papers, right?
"I don't know. What do you mean papers?"
You know, giving him permission to cross.
"Oh, no, 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 no. He had no passport that allowed him to leave the country. So he decided, well, I'll follow him and see what happens." So at the other end of the bridge was a guardhouse, and there were a number of guards there, and radio was blaring, and there was one guy watching who was crossing over, and he pretty well knew who should cross and who shouldn't cross simply because he was familiar with the traffic. And maybe a kilometer after the bridge was the border, and it was open. There was no control. The real control was the bridge. And so as they were approaching to go across, maybe 10 meters or 30 feet from the guardhouse, all at once he heard screaming where people were shouting and screaming. And the guard who was there looked at him, glanced at him, and then ran into the shack to hear what was going on. At that time, a Yugoslav soccer team was playing Russian team at Olympics, and it was in really heightened situation happening in the country that Stalin was trying to replace Tito, who was in Yugoslavia, and Tito rebelled and seceded from Stalin's control. And this soccer game was really super politically symbolic, that they are able to fight him, and not only as a country but as a soccer team. Soccer game was very symbolic of what they were doing. So those guards were excited, and so my father crossed, maybe 1 second to get out of the reach from the guards, and that's how he crossed.
Wow. That's amazing. Sounds like that timing might have been providential.
Well, my father just said it's not believable. If I didn't live it myself, I wouldn't have believed it could happen.
Well, that's good. Thank you for sharing that.